The film is Ferguson, a report of occupied territory, and after the documentary, which is about an hour long, we'll have a discussion with Orlando de Guzman, filmmaker. So why don't we get started, and I'll figure out how to turn off the lights.
Not just in Ferguson, but in all the municipalities that surrounded Ferguson. I realized that the media, that there was, in the mainstream media at least, there was a huge focus on just Ferguson, but nobody was really kind of looking at, there were a few papers that were kind of looking at, you know, what was going on in the municipalities. But I guess I kind of come to this, why I'm saying this, I come to this from sort of an experience of an outsider trying to learn more about the lies and hypocrisies and sort of mythologies that people in power kind of hold dearly in order to keep sort of this all kind of quiet. So that's kind of where I came from, and yeah.
Can you say a little bit more about how, I mean, one of the things you were just saying is how you're still trying to get a handle on the particularities of race relations here in the United States. Were there elements of this, though, that resonated with you working in other places? I mean, thinking about military states, militarized states, thinking about occupied military spaces and the kinds of violence that happens there. Are there, I mean, is that a point of resonance for you?
I guess, no, it's okay. It's better this way than me trying to. I'm not used to speaking publicly about my work. But I guess what struck me, I mean, just from my experience growing up in the Philippines, is that, you know, it's kind of a given that nobody really trusts the police. Nobody goes to the police for anything. You just don't do that. And with the being in St. Louis, here in the U.S., the whole kind of discussion about the police, there seems to be a kind of it seems almost kind of controversial to say that here in the U.S., and that's kind of what sort of was confusing to me, is that, you know, where I'm from, of course you don't you know, automatically trust the police. And then what struck me was meeting people in St. Louis, you know, lawyers, you know, not Brendan Roediger, who was supposed to show up today, but other people who just had absolutely no idea that this was going on in St. Louis. So, you know, I guess that's one thing.
Thank you. Comments, questions, discussion? It's a big room and it feels a little impersonal, so I from being in the audience myself, it does feel a little separate. Go ahead.
I wonder what you think about all those resignations that you end with, all the if that's is that reform, or is that actually sustaining the system?
I'm a bit cynical about the DOJ report because they came out with two reports at the time. One that exonerated Darren Wilson for his actions, and another that sort of tried to take the heat off of that sort of report by kind of criticizing the police as well. You know, the DOJ report focused solely on Ferguson. You know, there are, I think, 90 or 89 other municipalities that are even probably worse than Ferguson. You know, Pine Lawn is one that was featured in the documentary. 2 or 3 weeks ago, somebody supposedly tried to commit suicide in there. the people who took care of the jail wardens, I guess, would not allow medical attention to this person. And when he sort of came out of being unconscious, he denied that he tried to commit suicide, that that they were trying to kill him. So it's there's a lot of things like this happening in the municipal jails there, and a lot of it is really kind of just now being looked at. Actually, I should say that I've lived in the United States for about 3 years now, and I'm a bit ashamed to say that it took the death of Mike Brown for me to really try and for me to even realize that this stuff was happening.
This is a very, very powerful documentary, and I'm just wondering if you could talk a little bit about your process, because a lot of the things that kind of surface in this are things that I'm not at all surprised about and have heard many times over in many other communities, and so there really wasn't very much that was shocking. But what is surprising is that someone who was outside of the community was able to document this. And I'm just wondering if you could talk a little bit about even the trust issues and other kinds of things and ways that you were able to get people to talk to you and to say some of the things that I know are said only among people who are part of the community. I wonder if you could just talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. I guess as a documentary filmmaker, I come to people with completely transparent intentions, and one thing that I kind of noticed or saw in Ferguson in St. Louis was that I'm from the Philippines, a country that has had that sort of experienced colonialism, American colonialism, and that's sort of, kind of exist on the kind of edge of American empire. And when I came to Ferguson, I was just kind of, and in St. Louis, I was just struck by how it felt like, how it felt like colonialism in a way. What people were talking about felt very much like colonialism. That their experience was experience of people of color there was such that even if they tried to relate it to people from the outside, that nobody would kind of believe them. I partnered with a wonderful filmmaker from Durham by the name of Katina Parker, and together we kind of worked together on access with the community. But I guess from my perspective, as somebody who's lived kind of at the under the heel of empire of like American empire, it was just really striking for me to kind of see this kind of total level of control of people and of kind of use of power against people in the American context, within that. It's sort of like an internal kind of colonialism. And reading later about Black struggle, realizing that it was fundamentally a struggle against colonialism as well, and that's sort of kind of something that I thought was kind of came full circle for me in this. I realized that a lot of this is probably not new for people who are from the communities that I'm trying to represent. I'm also trying to show this to people who probably have no idea that this is going on. But I've showed this to. As I was finishing the film, I did a lot of rounds with people in Ferguson, the main characters in the film, just to make sure that they felt properly represented. the response was very warm. So to me, that's kind of what matters the most.
In the back, you had a, yeah, go ahead.
Hi, Orlando. We're neighbors. I'm originally from Singapore.
Okay.
And it's very interesting. And I call US home for the last 15 years. And how I imagined America when I was growing up and living in Singapore versus how I experienced America living in America is very much representative of your experience in the last few years.
Exactly.
I'm wondering, and even now when I talk to home, I haven't been back in a long time, home being Singapore. America still imagined as the land of great quality, blah, 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 blah. And I wonder if this, will you show it back home in the Philippines, back home in Southeast Asia? When will you, in what spaces do you think this could be received?
Yeah.
Where do you think there would be space for to air something like that, let's say perhaps Singapore and the Philippines? I know both very different societies, but you say more a bit about that, or
Yeah.
perhaps, or you have already?
This is online on YouTube, so it's accessible everywhere. I've had friends from the Philippines watch it, friends living in Thailand watch it, and their comments are like, "Wow, you American cops put our cops to shame." At least here, there's no pretense that that they're the good guys. But what struck them the most, I mean, that's them kind of trying to be funny, but also speaking the truth. But I think for them, what strikes people from the outside, and what struck me, was just how institutionalized all of this is, how kind of ingrained the repression is, that everything is kind of very much like run through ordinances and policies and tickets, and the bureaucracy is so encompassing that it just looks like normal, whereas Philippines, we don't quite have the organization that the police have, so there's a lot of kind of backdoor channels that you could do, but here it's very much entirely part of the structure, and it makes it very difficult to criticize, because it's just sort of accepted as this is how things are.
Thoughts?
I have a question.
Sure.
I thought that the comments about white anxiety were very smart and interesting, and I wondered if you could speak about your experience encountering that, making the film, or living in America, or if other people want to talk about it.
Yeah, I've never heard of the term white anxiety until
Welcome to America.
until I met Reverend Sekou, and I kind of wanted to make that a very kind of. I definitely wanted to be able to talk about that. That the issue I found was that there's kind of has to be kind of a lot of explaining to people what it is, because it's just sort of this invisible thing that nobody talks about, and it goes really deep. It's part of the way the media talks about everything. It's just like this elephant in the living room, and I think it affects every single policy on security and justice and everything. I've just been filming for the past 3 weeks in Complexo de Alamao in Rio, and I find it very fascinating, because I think that Brazil and the United States are kind of weird sort of mirror images of each other because of the history of slavery, but they're kind of a bit more blatant about things, what I'm trying to get at was that there's kind of a lot of very sort of just blatant talk about like we need to keep a certain kind of social order on our beaches. We can't have these sort of undesirables coming to Ipanema, and so there was a lot of that kind of happening. A lot of arrests were happening, but I kind of lost my point. But I think with white anxiety, as Reverend Sekou said, it just becomes, with this white anxiety, kind of black rage becomes kind of an anomaly. Like anything, it becomes the everything that you weigh everything against.
I'm going to weigh in on the white anxiety.
Yeah, go ahead.
Because one of the things I think was interesting about that point and how it, oh, by the way, I'm not Jennifer Pierce, Hokulani Aikau. I'm stepping in for Jennifer as the moderator. I teach at the University of Hawai'i-Manoa. And what's happening in Ferguson, what's happening in other neighborhoods and communities across the United States, is resonating, happens in Hawaii as well. And it's targeting Native Hawaiian men. And so in 2011, a federal agent of the United States shot and killed a Hawaiian man, Kendall Eberts, in a McDonald's in Waikiki. Just last year, we were sitting, my colleagues and I, all Native Hawaiian women, were in a seminar in our political science department. And a white man basically accused us of being terrorists because we were talking about how we are trying to do insurgent education as in line with and in affiliation with the work that's being done by Taiaike, Alfred, and others, who are saying that we need to produce warrior scholarship. And so we talked about doing insurgent pedagogy and research, and then he accused us of being terrorists. And saying how when he moved to Hawaii, he was told to, if you're going to go to Waianae, you better be armed because those guys over there will probably kick we're being recorded, will probably, beat you up. You'll be assaulted. And so this white anxiety is ever present in places that are highly militarized, such as Hawaii, where white folk, haole, feel under siege because they are not the majority or the visible majority in the kinds of ways that others have. And that's one of the things that I saw resonating with what was happening in Ferguson, white flight to the suburbs, and then as some of those, red line real estate property opens up and folks move in, white folks move out and they get scared. That white anxiety, I think, is ever present, and that's one of the elements of empire, colonialism, and racism, is that they both are holding up white supremacy. And so I was really appreciating that analytical component coming out in the documentary as well, because I think that there are connections.
Yeah, it was quite striking to me how in St. Louis, but this is true for many American cities, but just how race was really used by real estate companies, by realtors to essentially, steer black communities into white neighborhoods, and then convince white homeowners to sell their houses for cheap. So that they can then turn it around and sell the homes for hire to black folk who are moving in. But basically, using race and the assumption that, certain people have less value than others, thus, creating a kind of turnover in people to sort of feed this kind of American capitalist system that is, it was just that really struck me, and was kind of really disturbing in St. Louis. This woman, Adele Taylor, who featured in the documentary, who talked about her neighbors moving in, sorry, when she moved in, her neighbors were moving out. It's in an area called Spanish Lake, which has seen a lot of white flight. In fact, there's a rather disturbingly terrible documentary about Spanish Lake called Spanish Lake, I think. But it's disturbing in its honesty about the filmmaker's assumptions on, you know, and the nostalgia for kind of white-only communities. But at least it was honest about it. But yeah. There's actually been quite a few significant, I wish Brendan were here to talk about it, but there's been some very significant victories in terms of really trying to break down the municipal court systems in St. Louis County. I wish he was here to speak more in detail about those, but essentially what's happening is that certain communities, certain municipalities like Velda City are no longer allowed to keep people in jail for failure to pay, which wasn't the case before. There's been a move to really try and break down the kind of economic incentive of these municipalities to go out and ticket people. I guess there's a movement to really try and figure out how to sort of consolidate and get rid of this justice system that really is kind of milking people in order for it to exist. I think there's been a few victories, but I'm not sure how far they've gone. I mean, I haven't been able to really keep in touch much. I was in St. Louis about a month ago, starting to film another documentary there. But I mean, from what I gathered, there's still quite a lot of tickets being handed out to people. But I think the courts are kind of are under pressure now to not hold people in jail, figure out other ways for them to use maybe community service or whatever. But I mean, all of these, I feel like with one type of repression, it just shifts around, and I'm not quite that hopeful that, you know, that things will get any better.
Yes.
First of all, thank you so much for being here. The documentary was very striking. But I sort of want to get back to a similar question about the methods and the process behind making the film. Among the footage that you had by the end of the day, is there anything that you would have, looking back on it, would add, or was there anything among the footage that you definitely didn't want, or were on the fence about including? And what was your thought process behind making those decisions?
Yeah, I kind of had to fight long and hard to keep a lot of what was in there. A lot of it was taken out and then kind of slowly and strategically I kind of worked to put it back in again. By and large, I was sort of free to do whatever I wanted and edit however I wanted it until it was almost finished, and then when they saw it, they were like, "Oh my God!" But I stand by the way that the methods that I used to gather all of this. A lot of it was done. I mean, everything was done. Not a lot of it. Everything was done with the full consent and you know, trust of the people who were in the film. Even though, you know, at that period they had absolutely no reason to trust me as a newcomer, as somebody from the outside. But I'm glad that, you know, that they're happy with how it turned out. Something else I was going to say about it. No, I lost my train of thought. one thing that I immediately found in speaking with Reverend Sekou, the pastor at the end, was that, you know, when he talked about people's mistrust of the police, I mean, I knew exactly what he was talking about at that moment, but also I also deeply felt the significance of that. When people lose complete trust of the justice system, of the police, you essentially have no democracy. You have no, a state has absolutely no legitimacy, and you know, it was just kind of, I just didn't realize the extent that that was the case here in the United States, because you know, I somehow felt that things would be better here, naively.
Yes.
So I wonder if we could have a conversation about insurgent pedagogy and this film. I'm teaching a course, post-bellum 19th century U.S., and I'm thinking about how I compare this with Charles Chestnut's novel about vagrancy laws and how they fed black bodies into convict labor. But I would really love to hear what other people are thinking about how to teach this film, how to use it, how to teach Ferguson in a way that feels effective.
I think what struck me about Missouri and its place in American history, especially St. Louis, is the fact that, you know, this was kind of like that little sort of peninsula, this little sort of piece of the South sticking up north, but also was a huge, I guess, you know, had river commerce and that kind of defined its sort of the kind of relationship with slavery, but also was a huge sort of point for the Underground Railroad, being, you know, right opposite Illinois. But what kind of struck me was just in reading some of the material that's been written about St. Louis is just how from the beginning, from during slave period and after emancipation, that there was just such a obsession with the movement of black people in through St. Louis because of this history, and I really feel that pervades today. This sort of obsession with an interception of their free movement is something that really was like, I can't believe it. Like, it's just it's felt on a daily basis there, and also the history of the police. I guess not just St. Louis, but the rest of the United States, and the use of and it's sort of the import of Southern police into you know, northern states, you know, and this whole relationship with you know, slave catcher patrols and all of that was just like, you know, something that was also quite striking. But it's this sort of obsession with the movement of people across municipal boundaries, borders. All of that was something that that was really striking, and you see it today. Like, you drive down Natural Bridge Road in St. Louis, you know, crossing 8 or 9 different municipalities. Each municipality has a different speed limit. One's 20 miles an hour, one's 25, one's 30. You go over 1 mile over the speed limit, you're pulled over. It's just crazy, and you just have to, and it's just one after the other, and it's nonstop. Yeah.
So I was piggybacking on your question, because I think that the potential in this, the potential to use this film to do a lot of things, and I think that what you just described would be an excellent way of kind of using it. But there are a lot of things that could happen from that, and so even just dealing with the historical context, into a historical perspective would be, terrific. So you could do everything from the white privilege to the mass incarceration to the, you can just go right down the list in terms of not just this was what happened in Ferguson, but this is in the context of a historical context. You could use it. But even beyond that, I think there are other things that are there that you could use if you're teaching this. The rhetoric of the body language, and because it was out of here that we got the hands up, don't shoot, which really kind of went viral in many ways, and we've seen it kind of replicated in so many ways, in so many communities, in so many different things. I mean, everybody and their mother was doing hands up, don't shoot, a photograph of it. And I'm from Howard University, and the students at Howard were among the first who did a kind of a mass group image of that. Well, that then became something that fueled the Black Lives Matter movement, and did some other things. So there are ways to do that. The die-ins that happened there. I mean, just the black body, which has become with Ta-Nehisi Coates' book, and all the assault on the black body. So I mean, you could use this you could just kind of take it and each week do something different.
Yeah.
I mean, there's just a number of different things that you could do potentially, other than to kind of show it and say what happened in Ferguson, because Ferguson has become more than just a place name. It has become more than just a kind of a fueling of a movement. It has become something. It's almost like a point you can hang something on, because there are so many different things that are emerging from it. So I think that you could just really open up and look at it in a lot of different ways as a potential place for learning opportunities. And it's one of those films where you have to kind of look at 2 or 3 times, and each time there should be an aha moment. Not just kind of the facts that you didn't know the first time, but the other things that kind of emerge that will give you an opportunity to help your students understand it.
Can I add something to what you said? So I'm a historian from the pre-Civil War, and we don't always put these things in historical context, which you touched upon. And so in history, there's this no-no, you don't want to look at the past through the present lens. You want to keep the past is past and the present is present. You have an opportunity to put this in historical context, but anybody teaching the film from that perspective has to be historically grounded. So I work, my area of specialty is the Underground Railroad, and I went to give a lecture, and when I mapped Ferguson, when I finally dropped it into my historic map and saw where it sat in the zone around the Underground Railroad, I very easily was able to make these links. And so it really is important for people to understand that this is a continuum that starts even before fugitive slave laws and continues to today. And maybe somehow that, and if we can start to map that white anxiety and its history, we might get someplace other than this kind of the platitudes or the ineffectual ways in which we're dealing with these systems and problems now.
See, because even kind of based upon that, you look at Plessy versus Ferguson. Right, and that was there, right? So here you have some things. So it's not Dred Scott. Sorry, Dred Scott. So and so here this comes a century before, out of the same space, the same geographical area. And so there's some, and then you go fast forward to World War II, and you see some of the same issues kind of emerging. So if you're teaching it, you can't teach it in the context of, well, this is what happened in 2014. You have to teach it in the context of, this is a part of a continuum. This is a part, and I think that's what we do kind of look at things as something in isolation, and we don't understand it as part of something that's happened. So we and if we did understand that, then we wouldn't be surprised. We'd get it, because it's like, well, what else could have happened?
Yeah. I mean, if there's something that I could have added in there, I really would have loved to explore the period of slave patrols and the kind of birth of the sort of origins of the St. Louis police. But that, I guess that's just another documentary. But like you're saying, you know, Ferguson is very fascinating. Its proximity to Kinloch, the first African American community in St. Louis, was also you know, significant. I filmed in Kinloch for this documentary. Wasn't really able to use much of the footage in the end. You know, it's just this area that was once thriving, was bought off by the Airport Authority of St. Louis, completely destroyed for to be used for some kind of industrial development, but never was turned into anything. And many people from Kinloch moved to Ferguson, into all the Section 8 housing, Canfield Drive, where Mike Brown was killed. I appreciate your comments about everything being in a continuum. I really think that's important, and you know, I really hope that this documentary can be used as a teaching tool. A lot of the documentaries I've done, strangely, have become teaching tools in universities, but I hope that it's valuable for educators, because you know, it's quite an honor that, you know, it's you all considering it for that. So
I wanted to add to connect what you were saying about thinking about this pedagogically, and what you were saying about white anxiety and sort of the political climate of today, I think, and for other places that political climate has been ongoing for a really long time. To also thinking about, again, as an Indigenous scholar, and when I think about Missouri, the Show Me State, right, it's where the United States was going to, you know, explore and map the rest of the continent so that they could actualize, you know, their dream of manifest destiny, to be able to own and make available those lands for white settlement. So when we're thinking about that white anxiety, for me, that's what it's founded upon, is this belief that all of this land, the removal of indigenous peoples, the enslavement of black peoples, was all in the service of that white supremacist settler colonial project. And white anxiety is about the threat to that. I mean, that's the foundation of the capitalist economy that we live in today. That's the foundation. I mean, that's Donald Trump's
Second Amendment.
Right, that's it, right? And so I think that when we're thinking about history, it is really long, and it begins with dispossession, right? And multiple layers of enslavement and servitude. And another panel where, you know, someone was talking about, or yesterday, discussions about, you know, slavery and servitude, and, you know, the debt economy that this is producing, and the way that the structure really is forcing some to be propertyless, to be non-citizens. And we do see this in indigenous communities across, you know, this wealthy country. And so I think there's, again, more places for connection and for really opening this up to a strident critique of U.S. nation building. What does it take to make America? It takes dispossession and expropriation. You know, it takes enslavement. It takes empire to build the United States of America. And when we don't acknowledge that, I think that we're complacent in it. So I mean, that's what I'm also seeing when I see this film, is that long legacy. And St. Louis, the archway that makes manifest destiny possible, that makes Americans feel like they have a right to it all, you know? So that's also another connection that I was seeing.
I'm thinking about the histories of misery that we've been talking about, but also the histories of resistance to connect to this, and was very struck by the bit of the film which showed the activists reenacting lynching scenes, that tableau, right? So that's claiming a piece of that victimized past and reenacting it as a moment of protest against the present, and you're choosing to film that bit of protest art. But the other resistance footage that you use a fair amount, I guess there are two. So there are marches, contemporary Ferguson marches, but there's also civil rights era marching footage. And I'm wondering a little bit, when we think about these histories, how you're using that history of resistance. Certainly, because in a way, the story is this is not your father's civil rights movement, and I guess I'm wondering how that fits into the thing that you're talking about.
I guess I was more interested in the contrast between the two, and using that archival footage as kind of playing off the preconceived notions that we have of what civil rights movements, of what we remember and know of civil rights movements, and just showing the contrast to this new movement, and kind of breaking that apart. I think you mentioned something about the footage that I use, the modern footage, the protest, and something else, the lynching scene. Yeah, what was interesting about the lynching scene was that you saw so much media covering it at that moment, but when I turned on the news that day, I did not see a single image from that, and I began to wonder why. And I thought, well, you know, it's probably just, how do you fit this powerful imagery into a 30-second news story without freaking people out, without like it, I don't know. I felt like I was very interested in documenting how the media was documenting it as well. But I was mostly intrigued because I kind of knew, being somebody who's around cameras a lot, that this kind of image is not something that you can just sort of put out there without looking at the long view, looking back, and I think it was just perhaps too shocking for 6 o'clock news. But the contradictions are always that it's not shocking to put images of a dead black body on the news, or on social media. And this is something that I had to think very hard and strong about as well, and including this in the documentary. And I've had debates with my producer about the inclusion of Mike Brown's body in there. But I felt that it was necessary, but I know that people are very split about that too. I feel like in a documentary that's plotted out its course and direction, that it's probably okay. But in 12-second tweet video, I'm not so sure about that. But this is like how things are spread around these days.
Mm-hmm.
So in maybe a 30-second news report, I'm not so sure either. I try and go by the principle of not doing harm, and a lot of people are just fed up with these images that are coming out almost on a weekly, daily basis of people being killed and posted online, and somehow it's okay to, how I feel about this is kind of how the U.S. feels about showing, dead bodies of its soldiers in war. Somehow that's not okay, but then it's okay to show, black bodies being killed in the streets. It's just, I tread in this area very carefully.
The woman who you interviewed, when she holds up the newspaper
Yeah.
with her anger, which has, that sort of opposite moment where the newspaper takes that moment, that is a powerful moment for her, but makes it look, right, clearly the headline is not backing the fury that she's feeling.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Working on this documentary, really, I was rather naive in terms of the mistrust of black communities toward the media, and mainly because I'm, sort of an outsider and haven't really experienced this, but it was just, again, something that was really very, very profound, I feel like one small contribution I can make is to come up with a film that people feel happy about, a representation that they feel, good about. Pretty much all the main characters in the documentary said, this is one of the best things that I was able to participate in. So, to me that is a small success.
I too was interested in the different tactics, movement kind of tactics, and it was reminding me too of the Idle No More, and how the mall becomes a site of protest, which it was for Idle No More, was in this,
Yeah, that was Black Friday too, so it's quite significant.
Right, disrupting that capitalist economy, right? Understanding what that these things are linked together are super important, and sort of what my friend Jeff Cortez calls hashtag activism, and how new media really is mobilizing. Folks are able to mobilize in particular kinds of ways, and so I thought that was another sort of element that could be pulled out and looked at.
Something that I think is significant that should be mentioned is that I feel that the Black Lives Matter movement really gets at the heart of the hypocrisy in which this country is the foundation of this country. And I, which, you had mentioned is, for the existence of capitalism, there has to be a devaluation of life and entire groups of people. And a sort of a turning of one group of people against the other, even though they're essentially from the same class or same under the same system. What I think the system finds very dangerous about the Black Lives Matter movement is that it speaks the truth about this hypocrisy much more than other kind of movements that we've seen. Occupy Wall Street, that one comes to mind, and I think that what I'm seeing more and more is the suppression of this movement, using the very tools that this movement used initially, social media, to essentially break apart Twitter, using strategies that were used in counter-insurgency programs, in other parts of empire, essentially turning, social engineering people against each other, people within the movement, and with the use of kind of new, with the use of big data gathering and surveillance, electronic surveillance, a kind of new COINTELPRO that it doesn't rely on big piles of documents, but everything that's available online to essentially destroy movements and people. And I think that, and this is something that I see as somebody who monitors Twitter and the dark side of Twitter. You're seeing a very strong counter-reaction to the Black Lives Matter movement and sort of systematic picking apart of people within that movement. I know that the organization is probably building itself anticipating this, but I anticipate the sort of counter-reaction to be much more intense and strategic and potentially violent compared to Occupy, and there's a lot of reputation destroying, the kind of strategies that interestingly are being uncovered by the new Snowden documents, strategies being used by the Five Eyes Club, one being used by JTREC, which is a Canadian intel program that's essentially being handed around by all the different cabals of intelligence services in the US, New Zealand, Australia, England, and Canada.
Empire. Information. With that, we are out of time, so help me thank Orlando de Guzman. Thank you.
Thank you.